most people misunderstand emotional intelligence. They imagine someone who is always calm, always confident, always knows exactly what to say, and never gets angry. But emotionally intelligent people still get jealous. They still feel insecure. They still overthink. They still get hurt. The difference is what happens after the emotion appears. And you may already be doing some of these things without realizing what they actually say about you. Here are 8 signs you're probably more emotionally intelligent than you think. Imagine someone sends you a message that immediately annoys you. Your first instinct is to type back. You know exactly what you want to say, and it isn't very nice. But then you stop, maybe only for 10 seconds. You reread the message. You notice that you're angry. And instead of asking, "What should I say back?" you ask, "Why did that affect me so much?" That tiny pause matters. Emotional intelligence doesn't mean preventing emotion. It means noticing emotion before automatically turning it into behavior. You can be angry without sending the angry message. You can feel rejected without immediately deciding someone hates you. You can feel jealous without treating another person badly. The emotion is information. It doesn't have to become an instruction. For some people, being wrong feels almost unbearable. They don't hear, "You made a mistake." They hear, "You're stupid." So they defend themselves. They change the subject. They blame someone else. They explain why the mistake wasn't really their fault. But emotionally intelligent people are better at separating a mistake from their identity. They can say, "Yeah, I got that wrong," or "I shouldn't have said that." And something interesting happens. They don't become smaller by admitting it. They actually become easier to trust. Because if your identity doesn't depend on always being right, the truth becomes much less threatening. This is a big one. Someone tells you why they're upset, and your first thought might be, "I wouldn't react that way." But instead of immediately dismissing them, you try to understand how the situation looked from their side. Maybe you still disagree. Maybe you think they're exaggerating. Maybe you would have handled it completely differently. But you can still recognize, "Okay, I understand why that hurt you." Understanding isn't agreement. And emotional intelligence often means being able to hold both thoughts at once. "I don't think you're completely right." And "I can still understand what you're feeling." A lot of unnecessary conflict disappears when people learn that difference. You've had a terrible day. You're tired. Something went wrong at work. You're frustrated with yourself. Then someone asks you a completely innocent question, and suddenly your answer comes out sharper than you intended. An emotionally intelligent person eventually notices the connection. This isn't really about them. Maybe you apologize. Maybe you take a few minutes alone. Maybe you simply warn someone, "I'm stressed today, so if I seem quiet, it's not because of you." That level of awareness sounds simple, but it prevents other people from having to guess whether your mood is their fault. And that can save relationships from dozens of unnecessary misunderstandings. Someone you care about tells you they're struggling. A common reaction is to immediately start solving. "You should do this. Why don't you just try that? Here's what I would do." But sometimes people don't need a solution yet. They need to feel understood. Emotionally intelligent people often learn to ask, "Do you want advice, or do you just want me to listen?" That question is powerful because it recognizes something most people forget. Helping someone isn't always about removing their emotion. Sometimes it's about making enough space for them to feel it safely. Not every problem should be solved immediately. Sometimes someone is too angry to listen. Sometimes you're too angry to speak clearly. Sometimes both people are repeating the same sentences with slightly different words. And nothing productive is happening anymore. Emotional intelligence can look like saying, "I want to talk about this, but I don't think we're going to solve it like this." Then stopping. Not disappearing forever. Not giving someone the silent treatment. Just recognizing that continuing at the wrong moment can make the problem worse. Walking away from every difficult conversation is avoidance. But knowing when a conversation needs 20 minutes of breathing room can be maturity. This is where emotional intelligence becomes uncomfortable. You tell someone, "I can't do that," and they're disappointed. Maybe they become annoyed. Maybe they think you're selfish. Maybe they try to make you feel guilty. A lot of people immediately change their boundary because they can't tolerate the other person's negative reaction. But emotional intelligence includes understanding that another person's disappointment is not always proof that you've done something wrong. You can care that they're upset and still say no. You can understand their feelings and still protect your time. You can love someone and still refuse behavior that repeatedly hurts you. Healthy empathy doesn't mean giving everybody what they want. Sometimes it means respecting their feelings without abandoning your own needs. This may be one of the hardest signs. When something goes wrong, the brain loves finding a villain. They're difficult. They're selfish. They ruined everything. And sometimes the other person genuinely did behave badly. But emotionally intelligent people often ask one uncomfortable question: what part of this belongs to me? Maybe you avoided the conversation for too long. Maybe you assumed something instead of asking. Maybe you became defensive. Maybe you kept saying yes and then secretly resented it. Maybe you expected someone to understand a need you never communicated. This doesn't mean blaming yourself for everything. It means looking for the part you actually have power over. Because if the entire problem is always somebody else's fault, then somebody else always has to change before your life can improve. But if even 10% belongs to you, that 10% is something you can work with. So, are you emotionally intelligent? Emotional intelligence isn't about being calm 24 hours a day. It isn't about never getting angry, never feeling jealous, never making mistakes, or always saying the perfect thing. It's more subtle than that. It's noticing yourself, understanding other people without disappearing inside their feelings, taking responsibility without destroying your self-respect, setting boundaries without becoming cruel, and feeling strong emotions without letting every emotion control your next move. You can still lose your temper sometimes. You can still say the wrong thing. You can still misunderstand people. Emotionally intelligent people aren't emotionally perfect. They're emotionally aware enough to notice what happened and flexible enough to do something differently next time. So if you recognize yourself in several of these signs, you may be doing better than you think. Because emotional intelligence rarely announces itself. Sometimes it looks like a 10-second pause, a sincere apology, a difficult no, a quiet attempt to understand, or one simple question: what am I feeling right now? And what do I want to do with it?